Mr. Putin announced a 36-hour Orthodox Christmas ceasefire. Ukraine immediately told them where to go, and nobody took seriously either the gambit or even Putin's likelihood to stick to it himself. But there are 7 important points about Putin's move that I think we've got to mention to helpfully understand where we are in this war in early 2023. And this is what I'm going to do in this video. But first, I'm going to quote an article to you from Foreign Affairs from the 4th of January that is part of an increasing trend in the West asking for a peace deal and negotiations. So this is by Barry Posen, who is professor of political science at MIT, and he's writing on the 4th of January in Foreign Affairs. Russia's war appears to have morphed from regime change into a land grab. No, Mr. Posen, it hasn't, Professor Posen. It's a regime change war, just with limited Russian capacity for the time being, as the Russians see it. Professor Posen continues, if it wanted, the US could develop a diplomatic strategy to reduce maximalist thinking in both Ukraine and Russia. But to date, it's shown little interest in using its leverage to even try to coax the sides to the negotiating table. Those of us in the West who recommend such a diplomatic effort are regularly shouted down. But if this bloody, costly and risky stalemate continues for another year, perhaps that will change. Now, I don't think that people who are expressing Professor Posen's view should be shouted down or should be deplatformed. Professor Posen's view is a very important part of responsible democratic debate. But let's not shout down this view, but let's shoot it down instead. Putin's invasion of Ukraine is an opening up of a frontier on a larger pattern of escalation. And that first frontier is about regime change in Ukraine by Russia. And if that were possible, it's about then further escalation, not necessarily in further invasion, perhaps except in Moldova, but certainly the buildup of Russian troops on the borders of countries that neighbor Russia. That's where we would have been if Ukraine had fallen. And that's the project that has temporarily stalled for Putin in his view. But the idea that regime change has been given up in Moscow as an aspiration is something that I highly recommend us to reject. And the weight of my own videos on the main channel and our conversations here on chat point in this direction. But if we're going to dismiss these appeals for peace negotiations, let's look at what important takeaways we've got to know about this proposal. I've jotted down about 7 for us. The first one is just what we've said. Putin is not contemplating peace. Putin has not shifted to a territorial war from a regime change war. Second thing we've got to understand is that Putin is balancing 2 things. He wants a pause, but he also wants to work toward Ukraine in the next 1 to 2 to 3 to 5 years, giving up. And sometimes these aspirations get in each other's way. But Putin is, after bringing about Ukraine, just saying we've had enough of this, we'll compromise on significant territory. That won't be the end of the conflict, because that'll just be a stepping stone for Putin to then escalate and go further if and when capacity allows. So he wants Ukraine to give up, and he wants, right now, a pause if he can get it. And these are the 2 things he is balancing, and that's useful to keep in mind as we evaluate his ceasefire trick. what does this mean? Number 3, what does this mean for the Western audience? What is he trying to say with this? He's just saying, look, I want peace with a piece of Ukraine. And come on, look at all of you people who are fatigued with this conflict. I'm not asking for much. Give it to me. I'm ready to have peace. I just want a piece of Ukraine. That's not Putin's actual position, but that's the message he wants to convey, and the people who he wants to persuade are people who feel that it's now time to negotiate. And above all, he wants to create a more difficult climate for Zelensky to keep persuading the West that they should go on supporting Ukraine. 4, for the home audience, this really says, we are on the side of light, they are on the side of darkness, and history is with us, not with them. 5th, we've got to bear in mind that this has gone down, Putin's gambit has gone down really badly with the radicals at home. And indeed, Mr. Dugin compared Putin to Gorbachev on Telegram, I think yesterday. And that's an increasing problem for Putin, that he's going to have a very large minority, but well-organized demographic in the country that's going to be not just pro-war, but, if you like, pro-victory. And if Putin isn't giving the victory, they're not going to be happy. And this particular ceasefire trick has gone down very, very badly indeed with these folks. The 6th thing that's worth understanding is that Putin still significantly underestimates how much trouble he's in. And he underestimates that for several reasons, but the most important of which is an almost doctrinal commitment to the idea that the West is in decline, if not this year, then next year, if not next year, then the year after. And it's that allows him to think of his situation, which is that he is in a way surrounded by an alliance with virtually limitless resources that could support Ukraine for quite a while into the future. He is looking upon that and using his partly empirical observation, but partly just sort of faith-based doctrine about the decline of the West to give himself the sense that he is in less trouble than he's really in. And the 7th thing that I want us to take away from this is that whatever Putin does, whatever Putin says, it's going to be hard for him to avoid presiding over a process of militarization, increased militarization of Russian society in 2023. So this war is going to go beyond just affecting the mobilized and their families, but it'll go on to affect Russian society more widely. He will sometimes willingly and sometimes against his will end up, as it were, incorporating people into this project of his. These are some of the thoughts I wanted to share. I thought to give them maybe more coherently and beautifully on the main channel rather than rambling like this, but I just wanted to get this out quickly. So this was how I did it. Lots and lots of love. Talk very soon.